Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip hip hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Genes.
Welcome to CutOff Genes, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. Hello, everyone. It's just me, Jules, here. This is a bonus episode. I wanted to give you guys an extra free episode for they're all free, but for season 6. This is an addendum to season 6, basically, and this is 612B because I wanted this entire episode to be the rest of my conversation with Lora K Joy, adoptee and author. I like it when I get to edit interviews several weeks after I actually conducted them because I end up forgetting what we were talking about, and it's much more interesting to edit, and I hear things that I didn't necessarily hear when I was recording it because I was thinking about, the quality of the recording and things like that. But Lora has so much insight, and this particular part of our conversation really resonated with me. A lot of people hate that term, but it works for me. Anyway, this is the rest of her story. It really talks about the DNA part of her story and also goes into what she's learned and moving forward, what's important as adoptees out of the fog. So please enjoy Lora K Joy.
I wanted to find my dad for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to hold him accountable for what he did and walking away. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get to my siblings. Right. I wanted to give them the opportunity to know I exist and if they wanted to have a relationship. And I'm going to retrospectively say for both searches, for my mom and for starting this DNA search in 2020, I had to go into both of them with no expectations.
Absolutely.
Because I didn't know if I was going to find a grave. I didn't know if I was going to be rejected. I had no idea because you just don't know.
That's the first thing I tell any client I have.
Good. Yeah.
Don't have expectations. You just don't know. Keep an open mind. It's a fact-finding mission.
Yep. It's totally that. And be prepared for all the options because rejection is hard. Mm-hmm. So Mother's Day 2020, I do the kits and 23andMe comes back first. I have a fairly high match. I have a first cousin once removed. I can't remember how we figured out it was from paternal, but I had a search angel help me because I don't know the first thing about this, Julie. I mean,
it's a learning curve. It's absolutely, I didn't either when I first started doing it.
When you talk about your from the trenches stories, I go, I have to focus really hard.
Yeah, Rich is the same way. He's like, just say it to me like I'm a 4-year-old. And it's really hard because, I see his eyes start to glaze over and I realize I need to even simplify it even more. But it is what it is. So
it's really tricky. So I didn't want to mess it up. If I were I know people are like, you should control your own DNA. You should do your own searches. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I need help. Yeah. and I don't want to get it wrong.
Right.
So my search angel, who I had connected with through another adoptee, she figured out pretty quickly who my dad was. Okay. And that he was born in 1931 instead of 1940.
But he did have the same name.
He did have the same name.
It was him. Okay.
And the birth month was correct.
So he had lied by 9 years to your mother?
Yes.
Wow. He must have looked good.
Well, he must have, right? Because he was almost 50.
Wow.
He was 47. Yeah, 47, 46, something like late 40s. Yeah, when he was with her. So I think he must have, I don't know. She was 28. I don't know if he just, I don't know his reasoning.
All right.
Yeah. So if I hadn't done the DNA and had her help me, I would have never figured that out. So we quickly figure out who he is, and she builds the tree. And the first cousin, once removed, his mother is my first cousin.
Mm-hmm.
And she is sending me, my search angel is sending me addresses, phone numbers, emails. And I'm like, ooh, I feel like she just handed me a bomb. I'm like, I do not want this information. Like, I'm afraid to, like, I feel like,
what do you do with it? Yeah.
What do I, well, not like what do I do, but I'm like, should I have this? Like, does this make me a stalker? Like, I don't know. It just felt so
Yeah.
weird to be able to, like, oh, instantly, here's her contact information.
It's publicly available, though.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, but still, I'm like, oh, it made me want to drop my phone. Like, okay, I have to process this for a second. So I messaged my first cousin once removed on 23andMe. He doesn't respond. I think she finds my first cousin on Facebook and here, message her on Facebook. And I'm like, no, I need a minute here. So I do ultimately message her, but it's, we're not friends, so she doesn't see it.
Right.
And
did you friend request her?
I didn't. No.
I usually friend request first so that they can. This is for listeners. Here's a trick. If you're going to message somebody, friend request them first so that they say, "Who is this? Why does this person want to be my friend?" Which might make them look into their message requests.
Okay.
In which case, then when I messaged them, I'm like, "I messaged you. I friend requested you because of this." And can we? Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
I should have.
Lessons learned.
I didn't have lessons learned. Well, she didn't respond, and then he didn't respond. But I had my dad's address and I had his phone number, and I thought, well, you know what? I want to talk to him first anyway, because I always feel like, I don't know the relationship between him and his kids, so. Are they going to gatekeep me? Are they going to, respond? Do they know about me? At least I know he knows about me because she told him about the pregnancy. I just want to say that I talked to him first, or that I tried to reach him first.
For me, that is the most respectful thing to do.
Yeah. Moving on to the next step.
Right.
So
I agree.
Yeah. So
in case you care.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I do care. I mean, I think it is important because I did try to send a message on Facebook Messenger, but I kind of already figured she wasn't going to see it. So it was sort of a half effort on that sense. But so here's the other thing. My search angel was able to find this first cousin once removed, both of my first cousins, my dad, his sister, but she could not find my siblings. I couldn't understand, like, oh, we can find everybody else and addresses, phone numbers, but we can't find their names or anything. I decide to start with my dad, and I send him a letter, and I send him pictures of me and my kids. I forgot to mention that when I was adopted, the adoption agency had sent him a certified letter to sign off his paternity rights,
Right.
But he never did.
Okay.
So I had this letter from the adoption agency, and because he didn't do that, my adopted parents had to put an ad in the newspaper for a year before the adoption could be finalized. So he could have come back and claimed me.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
So was his name on your birth certificate? Is that why? Your original birth certificate?
It wasn't.
Interesting.
But it was on my adoption record. So I have these papers, right, from the file that show he was named and he was tried to be contacted and everything. So I make copies of that, and I send a letter, and I send photos, right? And I do not send it certified because he had declined the first certified letter 40 years ago.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
I decided
I don't like to send certified letters because it sends up alarms.
Yes. Yeah. I did not want to send up a big red flag for him. So I sent it, though, where I could track it, and I knew it was delivered.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't remember how, but FedEx or something. So, and he lived in this like apartment. Like, I don't know if it's like a assisted living or what, but so when I find out, right, that I think he's born in 1940, I think it's someone who's almost 80.
Mm-hmm.
And he's actually almost 90.
Right.
So he's living in a community, but he appears to be self-sufficient,
Mm-hmm.
from what we can tell. And so I send this letter to him and his packet, and I don't hear anything, of course. So a couple weeks later, I think I can't remember if I called his number first and I got his voicemail, or I called the apartment complex and I just said, "Hi, I'm wondering if you can tell me if, so-and-so still lives there, because, I sent some, and I just want to make sure I had the address correct." And I didn't say his name. I just said, "I'm trying to see if I've sent this packet to the right address. Can you tell me if somebody lives there?" And they said, "Well, we can't tell you, but if you give us your name and they do, and their name, and they do live here, we'll pass on a message for you." And I said, "Okay." So I give them the name and the message. And now, before she hung up, she goes, "Now, what company are you with?" I said, "Oh, I'm not with a company." That's all I said. Right. And of course, he doesn't call me back. And so either that, or then I called him and got the voicemail, but I didn't leave a message because I wasn't prepared to do that. So a couple more weeks go by, I don't hear anything. And I sit down and I write like a voicemail script and I write a regular script. Mm-hmm. And I think, okay, I'm going to call him again. I tell you, I sat on the floor for 20 minutes, just staring at my phone, shaking. Each time I called his number, I finally hit send. And I'm thinking this whole time, like, I write around the edges of my little scripts, like, "You deserve to know. This is not your fault." I write little affirmations to myself that you're allowed to do this. You're allowed to ask the questions. Yep. and make this phone call. So then I hit the button and I sit there and I think, "Oh gosh, please don't be a jerk. Please don't be a jerk." So he answers, and I think I might be dealing with the almost 90-year-old man who isn't really with it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he knows how to play it perfectly, mm-hmm. Right? So he thinks. So I immediately start off by saying my name and saying my mom's name, and talking through how I found him. I said I took a DNA test and I connected with your family, your niece. And he immediately went, "I didn't take a DNA test." Uh-huh. And I said, "No, I know you did not take a DNA test." and then he's like, basically then saying like, "I'm not going to either." So I'm like, "Well, no, I connected with this, cousin, your niece." And, "Well, yeah, that's my sister's daughter up by Chicago." I'm like, yeah, that's who I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And he's like, "Well, I only have my 2 kids in Texas." And I went, "Oh, well, thank you for that information."
Oh, thank you. Yes.
my son and my daughter. I'm like, yep, you have a son and a daughter. Okay. Good. And then he's like, "I moved out of Indiana in 1980. And I'm like, "Yep, I was born in 79. And, wow. And he says, this is the funniest thing. He's like, "Well, I got a vasectomy in the late 70s, early 80s. I'm like, "Yep, you probably found out about me." And then
probably early 80s.
If you're telling me the truth.
Wow.
So he's sitting there just rattling off all these things that he's thinking is going to convince me he's the wrong person. And all he's doing is
giving
confirming.
You clues and giving you hints. Yeah.
I can't remember what I said because this is, over 2 years ago now, but he says, "Well, you called the front desk and, he says he didn't get my packet." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know you probably did get my packet." He says, "I just got out of the hospital with the dang virus." This early COVID. I'm like, "Well, at least I have some good genes. If you're almost 90 and you survived it, yep. I guess I've got some good genes." So, and he says, "You're just bringing up the past. Mm-hmm. I have to get out of here, lady. And he kept calling me lady the whole time.
Ew.
And then he hangs up on me. And so at the very end, he gives himself away, right? You're just bringing up the past.
Yeah.
I think that because he has no idea how DNA works, that's the end of it. Right? So that phone call lasted 7 minutes. That was it.
Wow.
And I thought, well, okay, well, I tried. And he didn't ask me. I mean, if he had asked me not to contact his kids, it would have also given him away. So he didn't, and not that I would have listened.
Right.
I think that when biological families threaten you or tell you not to contact anybody else, I don't think you should have to listen to that.
Absolutely not. No, they can't gatekeep your siblings. No, absolutely not.
So I let that sit for a minute. Right. And this is like end of July of 20. And by end of August, I think, okay, I have this one cousin that I can reach out to, the mom of my match. Mm-hmm. And if she doesn't respond to me, I'll just watch the obituaries. And when he dies, I'll be able to get my siblings' names from there. So I send a letter to my first cousin, end of August, and it happens to be postmarked on the birthday of her son, who I matched with on 23andMe.
Okay.
So she gets the letter, and she's actually not there. She has a place in another state, and they were there and had their mail held. And so 2 weeks go by, and I think, okay, she's not calling me. Ugh. I'm just going to have to watch the obituary. Yeah. All this time, we still can't find my siblings. After I got that little hint that they were in the big state of Texas, I'm like, they're somewhere in Texas. Nothing. 2 weeks after this letter goes out, I get a phone call. I'm in the car on the way to an eye doctor's appointment, and I get a call, and I can tell from the number and the city who's on the other end. And I'm just like, I'm driving, but I'm like, I have to take this call. And of course it's on speaker, but I'm like, I answer. And it's my cousin and her brother, my other first cousin.
Okay.
He happened to be on a RV road trip and was visiting when they got the letter. And we talked for as long as we could before I was super late to my doctor appointment. They filled me in that they weren't really surprised about me popping up. I told them about my conversation with my dad, and I said, that's how that went. And they said, well, that's not surprising. And you kind of have this in common with your siblings. He had divorced their mom when they were like 10 and 5. Uh-huh. And then he was out of their life for 20 years.
Okay. Then he abandoned them.
So, yeah, he basically, walked away from them as well. And he, when he had told my mom that they were 10 and 12 when I was born, but they were really 12 and 17. Okay. So my brother was 17. And
what is it about sociopaths that can't get ages right?
I don't know. I think once he lied about his own age, he had to lie about my brother's age, because if he was 37, supposedly 37, then he would have been much younger when he had my brother. So I don't know if he had enough.
If it was even a conscious thing, or that he just doesn't understand numbers. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how much scheming went into this.
Right.
So they say, okay, you kind of have this in common. Really, when they got divorced, they moved out of the state. We lost contact with them too. We're Facebook friends, but we don't have a super close relationship either, because of our uncle being a jerk, basically.
Right.
I was able to get some family history from them, and they just said, oh, if our mom knew or our grandma knew, they would be so mad at him. It was sort of validating, right, to hear that they would have cared.
Yes.
just that they even cared, right?
Yes.
So they say to me, okay, this is, middle September. And they say, well, we're going to reach out to your brother and fill him in on the story. And then let's, can take it from there. If that's okay. They were like, if that's okay with you. And I'm like, of course it's okay with me.
That's
like,
the whole point.
Do you know how scary it is to make these phone calls? Yes. Thank you so much. So they do reach out to him that weekend, but they don't end up telling him about me because they hadn't talked to each other for 40 years. And the conversation kind of quickly went to our dad and went sort of south and negative in that sense. And just the reminiscing of all the bad things bad life choices he made, and the negative impact he had on his whole family, right? His sister and his parents. So my one cousin is on this road trip around the country in his RV, and he's like, oh, I'm going to be in the city where your brother lives. I'm going to see him. I'm going to tell him in person. And so I'm just sort of like, I kind of have to go with this because I don't have any control. I still don't have their names. I still don't I'm not Facebook friends with my cousins yet. So I can't discern who's who. I still don't, even if I was Facebook friends with them, I wouldn't be able to tell who they were because my siblings both had changed their last names because they didn't want to be related or associated to the dad. So that's made our search for them much more difficult. That's part of the reason we couldn't find them. So I wouldn't have known who they were. Comes time for his visit with my brother, and a hurricane hits Texas. So he gets rerouted. And then they want to have this conversation together. The two cousins want to have this conversation together with my brother so that they're doing it together. So it was middle of November before they had this conversation.
So what was the time frame now?
I got a call from them on September 11th.
Oh, geez.
And it was mid-November. Yeah, it was just 2 months.
Too long. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry.
But I also realized they had also kind of they felt like they're we kind of put ourselves in a pickle here because now we haven't told them.
Yeah.
And so, now they're like, okay, we've been holding this information and not shared it. And they're just waiting for a good time. So yeah. So I totally understood that, but there would have eventually, I don't know when, came a point where I've been like, okay, I need to take this over now.
Right.
I need to.
Right.
But they did it. They had a conversation with him in November. And a week, let's see, I think they talked to him on a Sunday, and that Friday, it was the Friday before Thanksgiving of 2020. And I got an email from my brother, and the title said, "Wow, hi sister."
Oh, I just got chills.
Me too.
Ugh.
I jumped off the couch. I was like, ooh, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And the first line was, our cousins contacted me this last weekend with a shocking story. I believe them and wanted to reach out and make contact with you.
Wow.
He had already talked to my sister, and the next day we had a 3-hour Zoom meeting.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was awesome. And when I met my mom and that side of the family, I didn't see the mirroring.
Yeah.
I do look like my mom. I'm related to her, you can tell, but I look like my brother and my sister. In fact, my sister and I could be twins, in some photos.
Wow.
It's bizarre. When my daughter was born, my husband was like, where did her nose come from? I'm like, I have no idea.
How would I know?
How would I know where her nose came from? I'm missing half the tree here. So we met my sister, and the first thing my husband says is, there's the nose. That's it. That's where she gets it. Yeah. And then when I see pictures of my dad, especially when he's younger and even older too, I can see all it's super strong from that side.
It's amazing.
And yeah, from our very beginnings, as newborn adopted babies, our systems are dysregulated.
Yep.
And each of these points on my story of healing have regulated my system a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And it was like my system just settled.
Yeah.
Just seeing their photos.
Yeah.
And seeing, and just seeing them on a screen, like talking to them. It was awesome. And, you know, in those couple of months between the time that I connected with my cousins and then connected with my siblings, I had phone calls and video chats and things with my cousins too. And, it was awesome. And we, you know, it's COVID, right? Though, I mean, if I could have jumped through that screen, I would have.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get to them. I couldn't get on a plane. I couldn't do anything. Nobody could go anywhere. So
it sucks. I don't know if you've heard on the podcast about, I've yet to meet my brother. All four of my siblings in Australia on my father's side, and they were scheduled. He was in South America playing cricket when COVID hit, and was going to meet his wife in LA. We already had their Airbnb booked and had Dodger tickets and all this stuff, and he got stuck there, and she couldn't fly here. So they never got here, and I've still never met him in person.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Anyway,
it sucks.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. It's total. I mean, it's just like one more thing that the pandemic, you know, kind of put on hold for everybody. And so my sister and then my two first cousins took 23andMe, and then we all showed up, you know, first cousins, half sister. And my brother, he did not want to do that. He didn't want to put his DNA in the big box store. He's like, well, let's do a private DNA test. And it wasn't that anyone doubted me. I mean, clearly, like just by looking at each other, we could tell we were related. Right. But he wanted to confront our dad.
Oh, okay.
So he did talk to him about it, and he denied it to my brother.
Did he?
Yeah. And my sister had been in and out of relationship and was finally done with him after a long time of, you know, making a little bit of effort every once in a while over a lifetime. And just as she was like, I'm absolutely done, I'm not trying anymore, my brother had started to rekindle or try to reconnect. And he's like, you know, he had a tiny, tiny relationship with me. And then when he didn't own up to this, it just like, you're done. Yeah. Like that was the final straw. If he had admitted, if he had had a nice conversation with me and on the phone, if he had claimed responsibility, things would have gone very differently. After that, you know, denial, we all took our DNA test. My brother and I did a private company DNA test. And because we were just a party of two, they didn't have anybody else to compare to. They couldn't tell where our different sides came from. And so they couldn't compare what came from what. So our moms both tested.
Oh, okay.
And so both of our moms were still living, of course. And then they tested, and then that took the maternal side out of things. Yeah. And then left only the paternal side to compare, which then came back as like 99.97% half siblings. So we have this, you know, DNA test, and then we have the 23andMe results. And I wrote a letter to my dad, and I just said, you're a coward, and you are alienating the three most important people in your life. Yep. And you're going to have to live the rest of your days knowing that. Yep. And I signed it, the daughter you should have kept. Wow. And acknowledged.
Good for you.
I sent that to my brother, and my brother wrote his own letter, and then my brother mailed everything, the copies of the DNA tests and everything to him. And I think he replied to my brother, but my brother never opened that.
Really?
envelope.
He didn't open it?
No, I know. I'm like, I don't want to read it. I know. I don't know if he has yet, but it's been over a year. So I'm like, I don't know what he's done with it. But
no way I could not open that.
Well, I think he's just going to keep lying, right? Like he's just going to keep, keep making some excuse. So
I mean,
anyway,
that's some restraint. I gotta give him that.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I kind of hinted that I'd like to see the letter someday, but I haven't gotten it yet, but
Just forward it to you without opening it, and you can open it.
Yeah. So
Dang.
anyway, that's the DNA part of the story, and it's been awesome. I ended up, after everybody got vaccinated, we visited. I took my kids to visit and met them in person. Stayed at my brother's house for a long weekend, and then I met my cousin in Indiana. One of my cousins in Indiana, because we happened to be there at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then because my mom still lives there. Then so in October 21. The 5 of us met in Las Vegas.
Cool.
We got one big condo,
Uh-huh.
like 4 bedroom, 4 bath, kitchen, living room. And we all stayed together for a long weekend. And it was as much of a reunion for my cousins and my siblings as it was for me coming in, because they hadn't seen each other for over 40 years, 50 years. So my sister was 4 or 5 years old when they last remembered seeing each other. So it was awesome. Now we have a group chat on our phones. We touch base all the time, and we're in touch all the time. And I just got back from a visit with my sister last weekend. It was her birthday, and I went to visit and hang out with her for the weekend, just me. And we went through boxes and boxes of pictures, and that's where I came across this one of her, and it freaked me out, Julie. I was like, oh my God, that's me. Like, I thought it was me.
That's amazing. And
I took a picture of it and I sent it to my husband, and I was like, that's freaky, right? He's like, oh my God. Like, that's one that, he's like, whoa, this is so weird, because he's never met anybody who looks like me, So.
And you grew up as an only child, right?
Yep. Yeah. I was an only child, so I didn't have anybody. Yeah. So that part of the story has been awesome and really healing for everybody involved. Throughout this time of working through that estrangement with my adoptive family, doing the DNA search, finding everybody on the paternal side, I also was connecting with the adoptee community and engaging in writing groups and Flourish class and everything. In the Flourish group.
Oh, that's the book that you sent me.
Yeah, that's the book I sent you.
Yes.
It was a year-long class, and it was led by Pam Cordano and Ann Heffron. And people started showing up in that group in a safe place, sharing some very deep personal experiences that we could all just nod our heads to. And people started showing up with considering changing their names. And as I'm thinking about writing my story, I'm thinking about publishing a book. And my husband is like, I'm not so sure you should use your last name for this book, because we live in a community where everybody knows us. And it's like, he wasn't too comfortable with that. And I'm like, well, how am I going to write my story and tell my truth under a different name? Like, I can't do that. That's not right. So
that's not the truth.
That's not the truth. So I started thinking about how could I still be me, but not use my name, my last name. And through meeting my mom, my original birth certificate did not have a first name on it. It just had a last name. And then on my adoption decree, there was the name Kimberly. And then it was my adoptive name, which was Joy. And I just assumed my mom had named me Kimberly.
Right.
And when I met her, I'm like, oh, you named me Kimberly. And she's like, no, I didn't. And I was like, what? What do you mean you didn't name me Kimberly? She goes, well, I didn't think I had a right to put your name on the birth certificate. I don't know if she understood that I was going to have 2 birth certificates.
Yeah, she thought that was going to be the birth certificate. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's like, I didn't think I had the right to put that name on there. So she named me for herself, and that was Lora.
Okay.
And her last name starts with a K. So I just started playing around with the Lora and the Joy, and then how can I fit the Kimberly or the last name in there?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, Lora K Joy. So that's how I came up with that name. Okay. And I started showing up in the Flourish group. That's the first place I started showing up as Lora K Joy. And I put the whole thing in there, not just Laura. And I just started trying it on, the Lora. And in the adoptee community, I just started trying it on. And one day it just was like, I'm Lora now. Like, it just hit me. And I thought, oh God, that's so much paperwork to change my name.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot of paperwork. So I kind of sat with it for a minute, and then my birthday is in January, and I decided in January of 22 this year, I changed my name.
Your whole name.
And yeah, I just changed it to Lora.
Right, your first name.
And my last name, my married last name. And so now I don't have a middle name. Okay. So my legal name is not Lora K Joy, but it's Lora and then my married last name. And it was a super simple process in the easy to change. I went to the courthouse, paid the fee, went in the next week, 10-minute deal, and it was done. But I had to go talk to a judge, and I thought, well, gosh, what's he going to ask me? What if there's a snowstorm? So I only told like 3 people. Like, I told my husband and a couple of friends. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell anybody, really. So I went in, and once it was official, then I called my mom. And she's so even-keeled this whole time. She's so like, it is what it is. And she went, "You did?" Like, she got so excited. And I was like, yeah, like, oh, I'm glad that made you happy. Yeah. So yeah, I changed my name, and the next day it was like this weight lifted. Like, Lora came to the surface finally for the first time. You know, the ghost kingdom. Yep. She'd always been in there. Yeah. And you know, my adoptive name always felt like a lie. I hated my name. I hated answering to it. I hated that the reasoning, you know, that they named me Joy was I brought them so much joy. Oh, so
may as well call you gift.
Yeah, exactly. So
or medicine.
It was, yeah, exactly. It was a reclaiming.
Yes.
It was my truth, and it's who I always should have been. And so I was going through the paperwork and changing everything. And I have this amended adopted birth certificate that has my old name on it with my adoptive parents who I'm not in relation with anymore. And I'm like, oh, I want to burn this. Like, I do not want this anymore. And so I'm sitting with this, I'm going through this process, I'm letting it, percolate. I thought, how do I get my original birth certificate reinstated? So I called a lawyer in Indiana, and I said, okay, here's the situation. I just changed my name. I was born and adopted and raised in Indiana. How can I get my original birth certificate with my biological mom on it and my birth name that she gave me? And he said, well, the only way to do that is like an adult adoption. I'm like, ooh, yuck.
Weird.
So I said, okay, what does that mean? And basically, any adult, and I don't know, state by state if this is different, but in Indiana, any adult can adopt another adult under, if they both consent or whatever. And they're not doing anything, illegal to escape anything, that they've done wrong. So I said, okay, well, let me think about that. So I thought about it, and I decided I just wanted that extra level of reclaiming, right? I wanted my original birth certificate. I wanted to be legally my mom's daughter again. And so after I thought about it for a couple months, I called my mom again and I said, okay, here's what I found out. What do you think? And she's like, oh, that's weird. She goes, why would I have to? She goes, I gave birth to you. Why do I have to adopt you? And I'm like, I know. Yeah. I know, it's weird. And she goes, okay. I said, well, you think about it, no pressure, no rush, whatever. And that was the beginning of the conversation. We talked for about an hour. And by the end of the conversation, she's like, go ahead and do it. She's like, it's just putting things back to the way they were originally.
Absolutely.
And I said, okay, are you sure? Yeah. Okay. So we went through with that. And just a couple weeks ago, it was legally finalized that she illegally adopted me back.
Wow.
So she's legally my mom now.
You are a legal next of kin, but you'd have a brother.
Yep. I'm legally hers now. And my name is, and I'll get a new birth certificate, which is really just what my original birth certificate would have said. It was meaningful to me to have it finalized. I wasn't sure, how I was going to feel about it, but just like my name, like once it was official, I was free to feel it. Right. And then let that sink in. And I say, going back to the estrangement, I needed the space to be able to let these things happen. I would have always felt sort of trapped under that obligation or whatever. I would have never had the emotional freedom to let these things happen. And I tried I didn't force anything. I let that name, it just like came to me one day. I was like, oh, I'm actually feeling like Lora now. And I wanted it to be organic. And every time I see something, I try to work through it, So I'm trying to just live that authentic self that I wasn't allowed to live before, and live in my truth. And I'm trying to be unapologetic about it because we're allowed to have that.
We're allowed. We don't have to apologize. We're not obligated for somebody else to feel comfortable at the detriment of our own mental health.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what, these books are about. These books are about my journey and my points on my healing journey that have really been helpful to me and impactful to me.
Yep.
And that I hope other adoptees can.
Let's wrap it up with that. Tell me what the intention is for how these books should be used.
They certainly present as children's books, but I really do call them illustrated books because they are such deep topics. And Rich was questioning the titles, and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to clarify this because I do, like you said, they are not to be handed to kids to read by themselves.
Right, that would be crazy.
Yeah. I had my therapist read all of these books before I published them. And I said, do you feel like these are helpful? Do you feel like these could be useful? And she's like, absolutely. And so she sort of helped me vet that concept. And my vision for them is that that therapists use them with their clients. And that's a really, I just feel like to have that professional support.
Absolutely. And it absolutely gets the point across that is so difficult for us to explain to people in layman's terms. What is hypervigilance? Why, and especially, as you know, my favorite book is the one about hypervigilance because, and especially Healing Adoptee Worry, because when I was a child, I was worried all the time. That was the only word I knew for it. I was worried. I was worried that this was going to happen that day. I was worried that these people were going to make fun of me. I was worried. It was worry, which is obviously, and that was the only word. And I would say, and I would try to explain to my parents, well, I'm worried about that. And all they could say was, don't worry, you have nothing to worry about. That was as far as it got.
I can totally relate to that. Worried all the time about everything. And also then as I got older, I worried that if I didn't worry enough, something bad was going to happen.
Right.
And that
Hence
it was
the
a form of,
vigilance.
right.
Right.
There was a control, like I could worry and control things.
Yeah.
And that is not how it works. And that is what happened with the hypervigilance book. I was talking to my now therapist in 2020. It was during COVID. And I was worried about something. And I thought, okay, in 2 weeks, I don't have to worry anymore. It'll be over.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, hold on a second. Mm-hmm. She said, that is an old coping mechanism from adoption. And I said, what? Are you kidding me? Yes. She's like, no. She said, and then she talked me through what's in the book. All it took for me, was for her to say that.
Yeah.
This is an old coping mechanism for you. If something bad happens, you can handle it now. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Mm-hmm. I can. Yeah. I don't have to have plan A, B, and C.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong, I don't have. So my whole body, and this is over Zoom, right? Like this is super impactful just looking at her through the screen. Yeah. And my whole body relaxed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I thought this was my personality. I thought this is how I was wired, which I mean, it was, right? I was wired to survive.
Right.
But I thought this is how I was. This is just how I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And after that session, that whole day I was relaxed. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to wake up tomorrow. It's going to be back. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, it's still gone. It's still gone. I couldn't believe how relaxed I was. And I walked around my house looking for this stupid hypervigilance that had been attached to me the whole time. I'm like, it's going to jump out and get me again.
Yeah.
And it didn't. And so I was reading this story to Anne Heffron, who's my writing coach, and she started laughing and she's like, you have to make this into a children's book. And I'm like, what? Yeah. And so I took the idea and I was like, okay. And I wrote it in about 20 minutes because it was an authentic, true experience.
Yes.
And I thought the idea of like what you said was simplifying the language. Mm-hmm. Like that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to simplify the language so that there's no question. Right? There's no question from an adoptive parent's perspective. Right.
That are singular thoughts that you can work on individually to come to an understanding of what they mean.
Yep.
And I think it's just brilliant. I can't say that enough. Lora K Joy, thank you so much for spending this time with me.
Thank you so much, Julie. I so appreciate what you're doing on the podcast and advocating for adoptees and NPEs. And I love that you loved the books and that they helped you, and I hope that they can help other people too. Well, so thank you so much.
Well, I love what you're doing, and I can't thank you enough, and I feel like I've made a new kindred spirit.
Okay, everyone, that is the end of this bonus episode. I hope you enjoyed Lora K Joy. You can get her books on Amazon or probably anywhere you can buy books online. They are, I think, very important for the adoptee and adoption community. In the meantime, if you would like help on your DNA case, or if you would like to tell your story on the podcast, reach out to me at cutoffjeans.com. Everything Julie Dixon Jackson is there. And I'm about to delete our Twitter account because can't support that anymore. So, but there are, all the other socials. I'm so out there, you guys. It's so easy to find me. Anyway, we will see you in a couple of weeks with season 7. As always, the truth is in your genes.